The second reading is from the 21st chapter of Revelation. I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out from heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them, and they will be his peoples. And God himself will be with them. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more, for the first things have passed away." And the one who was seated on the throne said, "See, I am making all things new." Also he said, "Write this, for these words are trustworthy and true." Then he said to me, "It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give water as the gift from the spring of the water of life." Holy wisdom, holy word.
Hallelujah. Everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. Hallelujah. 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 The Holy Gospel according to St. John from the 13th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
When he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am with you a little longer. You will look for me, and as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I'm going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." The gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Well, I get one mistake this morning, so there you've had it. I put the wrong gospel up. It's kind of disgusting whenever we don't have things that work the right way, isn't it? And speaking of disgusting, prepare yourselves, because I've been reading a book that's called Unclean. It's written by a psychologist. And the psychologist claims, I'm not a theologian. I disagree with him because I think all of us are theologians. We have our ideas about God that are formed by the church, our ideas that are about God that are formed by our own opinions and our own experiences. We're all theologians. In some way, we all think about God. But he gives that caveat at the beginning of his book, Unclean, and he says, now, I give a Dixie cup. Tell me you all know what Dixie cups are, right? I mean, this crowd is old enough to know Dixie cups, okay? So I give a Dixie cup to everyone, and I ask them, spit in the Dixie cup. Now drink it. Yeah, I know, you're disgusted, right? Why are you disgusted? It's yours. It's your saliva. You swallow saliva every day. Why is that so disgusting? Because it's no longer yours once it's outside of you, is it? It's no longer yours. It's unclean in some way. I have a better story. Good, right? The last two aunts from my mother's side were twins. One Nancy and one Becky. And Nancy and Becky, what one wouldn't think of, the other one would. You know twins. If you don't, come on Saturday night and Carol and Raj Ingalls twins will show you what one doesn't think of, the other one does. And they would get into all kinds of trouble. Well, one time, on the front porch at their home, Granny went out, their mother, my granny, and she went out and she saw them and she said, "What are you two doing?" And they didn't say anything. And she looked down and there was a half of a slug on the ground. You know slug, right? We hate them. They're in the garden. Gwen doesn't like them at all, do you, Gwen? It was only half of one. And so she looked at Nancy and she said, "Where's the slug? Did you eat it?" She said, "No." She looked at Becky. "Did you eat it?" "No." She looked at Becky again. She looked at Nancy again. She said, "Nancy, did Becky eat it?" Because you know you have to ask about the other. She said, "No." Becky said, she looked at her and she said, "Becky, did Nancy eat it?" "No." And then Becky said, "But she spit it out." Now, why are we disgusted by that? When I was in France, we ate escargot. Why is that so disgusting? It tasted like garlic and butter. Of course, they didn't have garlic and butter on theirs. Why do we get disgusted at things? We have to learn how to get disgusted, don't we? We learn it from our parents. We learn it from our culture. As a matter of fact, the guy who wrote this book, Unclean, says that there are certain things that are unclean that are culturally told and taught to us, and those things might include theological things. They might include moral things. They might include food items. I mean, I like Brussels sprouts. Other people think they're disgusting. I wouldn't mind to eat escargot, but other people, I mean, I don't want it every day. I like liver with onions. A lot of people think it's disgusting. So things that we consider disgusting many times can be very subjective, can't they? And they can be taught to us. St. Peter, who reminds us in this Acts of the Apostles, something that we heard last week, something about a vision that he saw 3 times in the Lord, and 3 times the Lord said to him, "If I say something is clean, it's clean." And Peter understands that vision to mean I can eat whatever I want, but he also understands it to mean I can go to this person who is considered unclean by Jewish people. Because you see, Peter had been told to go to Cornelius, the Roman general, and his family, and to give them the good news. And when he gives them the good news, he and his family would be saved. And Peter thinks to himself, as a good Jew would, I can't go to him, I'll be unclean. It's not the right thing. Society has told me otherwise. Now think about that for a moment. In our own society, we have the same kinds of rules. You all of you, have certain places you'll go, certain things you'll do, and certain things you won't. As I've said before, right after I got here, I was sitting down at a meal, having a meal and with my family, and somebody from the church walked up and said, "Pastor, you're having a beer?" And I thought to myself, yeah? Didn't you just have one? But pastors are not supposed to do that according to the person's mind and the mindset. And I understand that, but sometimes our own ideas about what is right and wrong are not necessarily what's correct. Peter found that out. He knew it was wrong according to his Jewish tradition wrong to go to this person who would make him unclean. He knew it was wrong to eat snakes and lizards and shrimp and pork. He knew it was wrong to do all of that, and yet when this great sheet came down in the vision 3 times and he saw all of those things, and God said in the vision, "Eat," he knew that something different was happening. Jesus, then, in this gospel that we hear, this gospel that we've heard many times, but especially we hear it on Maundy Thursday. And you remember how Peter is the very same one who figures very prominently in that story. He's there, Jesus is washing all of their feet, and Peter says, "You can't do this. You're the master. You can't wash my feet." And Jesus says, "Okay, well, if I don't wash your feet, you're not a part of me." And Peter changes his tune real fast and says, "Okay, well, wash my whole body." And he says, "Peter, just settle down. Your feet are enough. Believe me, they're stinky." Think about it. Disgusting. And Jesus does it. And then, as if it were a symbol of exactly what was going on, Jesus says, "This is the new commandment that I'm giving you now, to love one another." He didn't say, "This is a new idea that I'm giving you. Why don't you toss this around amongst yourselves and see if you like it? And those of you who don't like it, you don't have to do it." But he said, "This is my commandment, that you love one another." That's why we say Maundy Thursday, which is the Latin for commandment, mandatum. The new commandment, to love one another. So it's not an option for us. It's not an option whether we love one another, especially those that sit in the pews with us, and particularly those who are on the outside of us. And I think we all know what the outsiders look like. We all know exactly, I hope you know, how your pastor thinks about different people who come into the service. If you come into this service, you are welcome. If you come to this table and you offer your hands forward, you are welcome. Remember my stories about the homeless guy, Charlie, in Toledo? I loved Charlie dearly. I loved Charlie. I still miss him today. Charlie was one of the most unkempt, the dirtiest, nastiest individuals you could ever meet. And I remember one time very clearly, I can still see it in my mind's eye, he came into the church, asked if he could see me. I opened the door and said, "Charlie, come on in." It was cold outside. Gave him a coffee, and he sat there and coughed and snotted and just coughed all over me. And I kept thinking to myself, I'm going to get tuberculosis or something. This is horrible. And it's that day I asked Charlie, why don't you just go live with your daughter? I mean, because he was so dirty, his skin was dark. I said, "Charlie, please, just go live with your daughter." He said, "No, she makes me take a shower." And I thought, is that such a bad thing, Charlie? But I did understand what he meant. And I understand what Jesus says. Jesus says, love them right where they are. I've heard that saying a lot. Love the sinner, but hate the sin. That's not biblical. That's not biblical. Love them is what Jesus says. Love them whenever they're ugly. Love them whenever they don't take a shower. Believe me, I know those. Love them whenever they're the ugliest people that could ever happen to you. Love them whenever they smell. Love them when they're different from you. Jesus never says anything, never says but never says it's an option. And this world today, I don't know about you, but I'm just kind of tired of so many people in so many ways saying to one another, but you're wrong, but you're wrong, but you're wrong. Why couldn't we just say, you know what, I love you anyway? Why couldn't we? What would the world look like? I don't know. But I know that Jesus thought it would be changed. And I know that Jesus has commanded us to do just that. Amen.